statement so that we can get started. I am officially starting the May 20th meeting of the town's Diversity and Inclusion Committee in Westborough, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order, imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Westborough Diversity and Inclusion Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website, www.town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. Watch live on youtube.com/Westborough TV or on Westborough TV at Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192, or watch a recorded version later on the website westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort is being made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. To contribute to the discussion on any agenda items or to suggest a topic for future agenda items, members of the public are encouraged to send email to me, the chairperson, at the email address diversity@town.westborough.ma.us, or call me at 508-366-3090. All right, welcome everybody. All right, so we have 7 of us. I haven't heard of anybody who is explicitly not able to attend. I am expecting Ema. Ryan is a questionable. There's Ema now. So we should.
Still traveling?
He's still traveling. He comes back this week, like in the next few days. But I did meet with him. He did meet with me as part of the between meetings work that we were doing. So that was nice. All right, our agenda today is to approve some minutes.
Excuse me, do you want me to take notes? I didn't see if Alma's here.
Elma's here. Hi,
Oh,
Elma.
she is.
Yeah.
I am here and I am writing.
Thank you, Elma. So we're going to approve minutes. I want to briefly share with you the request for a letter I received from the police chief on behalf of this committee. We'll talk about community issues announcements, and we'll spend the biggest chunk of time today reviewing the small group efforts that we made between now and the last meeting. And then we need to talk about when we're going to talk to the select board about that, and finally plan the schedule of future meetings, particularly in the context of lifting COVID restrictions and this soon to be vacated emergency order from the governor. All right. So we'll dive right into the minutes. Last month, we approved March minutes, but we didn't have January, and there was a problem with April. So today we have January minutes, February minutes, and April minutes. Let's start with the January minutes. May I have a motion to approve the January minutes?
I move.
Okay. Rana moves.
Second.
Kim seconds. Thank you. I will do a roll call vote going around my screen. Rana?
Yes, Rappaport.
Shelby?
Marshall, yes.
Kim?
Foster, yes.
Ema?
Yes, yeah.
Mike?
Daniels, yes.
Shazia?
Audit, yes.
And Alma?
Yes.
And Presley, yes. Awesome. Okay, February minutes. You'll see I made a correction at the end. Maybe you all who are good at this open meeting stuff can tell me, what did we do when I realized I watched the end of the video and we didn't get a motion to adjourn. we just ended. Is there anything else to do with it other than what I did, which is say we ended the meeting? Okay,
I think that's fine. I think that's fine.
okay. I mean, you two who always keep me on my toes about this weren't at that particular meeting at that particular time, so I appreciate and other times your reminder around that. So with that said, do I have a motion to approve the February minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Did you say second, Shelby?
yes.
Thanks.
All right, so wait. One thing I do know about minutes, if you weren't at the meeting, you can't vote on it. Or you,
Actually, you can.
since when?
It's a long time.
Okay,
Oh.
fine. I don't care.
Thank you.
That's fine.
No,
Yep.
really, you can. Some people choose to abstain because, they weren't there and they feel like they can, but you can vote because really, the moment the minutes are produced, even in drafts, sorry for the phone ringing in the background. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, they officially become minutes even in draft.
Okay, that's fine.
Cool. All right, so I'm gonna do a roll call vote for that one. Rana,
Rappaport, yes.
Shelby,
Marshall, yes.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Shazia,
Got it, yes.
Mike,
Daniels, yes.
Ema,
Ness, yes.
and Alma.
Wait, yes, who seconded that motion, please?
Shelby. Kim made the motion and Shelby seconded, and Presley, yes.
Okay,
All right, thank you. And moving on to the April minutes, which you just received today. Sorry, I was out yesterday afternoon and out this morning, and so that's why you got them so late. If enough people have read them, we'll take a motion to approve them. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, then we can defer that until next month.
I'm fine to make a motion to approve them as presented.
and I second.
Okay, Shelby makes the motion, Rana seconds. And Rana, will you start with the vote, please?
Rappaport, yes.
Shelby,
Marshall, yes.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Shazia,
Got it, yes.
Mike,
Daniels, yes.
Ema,
Ness, yes.
and Alma,
Yes.
and Presley, yes. All right, we're getting good at that. I've only been in this position for a year and a half, so, yay.
Well, Kara, just as a side note, I can't tell you how many people that increasingly are interested in the work of not only this committee, but others. And it's pretty disheartening for them if they go to try to see minutes, to understand what has the committee been discussing and they can't see them. Obviously, we have our friends at Westborough TV to keep us, captured forever on tape. But although it's drudgery, I appreciate Alma's work to take the minutes. And we have to go through this voting and all this. It's really important. It really does memorialize the work of the committee and gives people an opportunity to engage. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And it is at the top of my list for after I take time off this week to make sure everything is posted. So thank you for mentioning that. All right. So the last thing I sent you yesterday for the packet to prepare for this meeting, and I sent it in a separate email, was a request from Police Chief Jeff Laurie for me as the chairperson of this committee to submit a letter in support of a project that the police force is trying to enter into. It's a grant application, from what I understand, for the ABLE project. In short, if you read the summary on the Word document, the project will train the police officers to be active bystanders in intervening with their peers, other police officers, in the face of inappropriate behavior, in short. So I just wanted to get your input and your thoughts before I wrote such a letter of support.
Mike, do you have anything to add to this?
I do.
Please, please do.
Yeah, so another thing to really look at is it deals with issues with procedural justice as well. So it's not just intervening when there's excessive force used. There's a whole nother module attached to, I guess, this coursework that we're going to send officers to get them trained in how to properly use procedural justice and to recognize, certain behaviors in other officers and things like that. It's a little more in depth. Officer Shipwreck was awesome. He went to a police reform bill course that the chief sent him to, and he heard about this course offering. I believe it's in Georgetown. So he'll probably be attending that, and he's going to come back and train all the other officers as well. So it's that's one component, duty to intervene, but the other component is procedural justice, which is obviously a hot topic. So that's it. But I'm in support of it, obviously. So just so
Can
you know.
someone explain to me what procedural justice means? Oh, sorry, Kim. I apologize. Kim had her hand up and I just interjected.
Either way, so procedural justice is basically, there's 4 pillars that we're supposed to follow when we're talking about procedural justice to police officers. Treating people with fairness, respect. One of the other ones is transparency and giving people a voice. So for example, a lot of times in the past, and what we're learning now through our training, a lot of times in the past is, as we're arriving at a call, we already have our past experiences with like things. For example, I'll use a quick example of a domestic violence situation, right? So as a police officer, you're driving to a domestic violence incident and you're already in your mind formulating what the situation is before you get there, right? That's how we're trained to prepare. But what procedural justice with law enforcement does, it takes us out of that, right? Obviously, there's some safety concerns and things like that when we're, engaged with people in the community that, depending on what the call is, but it kind of gives us, a broader perspective in dealing with people rather than just coming to, a conclusion or an assumption of what the situation is before we actually, kind of vet it out in our minds and give people the opportunity to really talk about what the issue is instead of, just making an assumption and then going with what the law allows us to do. So I hope that explains it.
Thank you. That for me, it was very clarifying. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I like the example of the preparing for a domestic violence call. This is anecdotal, but I think it's a helpful illustration. Prior to working in municipal government, I ran a program that supported LGBTQ survivors of domestic violence, amongst other types of violence, including hate violence. But one of the reasons they needed a program like ours is that we saw all too many times that couples where there were same-sex couples, for example, who had a domestic violence incident, there would be oftentimes both members of the couple were arrested, or the more masculine appearing of the couple were arrested based on sort of these preconceived biases of the law enforcement officers when the actual dynamics would have been clear had there not been those, preconceived biases. So I really like that example of thinking how you stopping before you proceed to really consider all of the factors rather than just going on what your experience has been. So it's good. So thank you. Kim, you had a comment?
Just a question, because I read this morning and gave it a relatively quick read. But Mike, is this, so is it a competitive, I assume this is an application to the program and they select attendees. Do you know how competitive it is?
I don't think it's competitive because there obviously is a demonstrated need for it.
Yep.
So the application process, as far as I know, is we need an endorsement from the community. and community organizations to say, hey, you know, we want our officers to go through this training, which I can't imagine why anybody would say no. But we just need community support. It's
Okay,
just like
okay.
any other grant application where, you know, you apply for a grant, you need the community support to say, yeah, we acknowledge that this is an issue in our community. And so we support our police in you know, finding training and training, you know, others to, you know, do the things that it says that they're going to do. So,
Okay. So the hope is if the application is completed and sent in, then it looks like over the summer is the timeline for the training to start.
yeah, I think,
Oh, that's great.
I think we'll be okay. Like, I mean, there's definitely a need. I mean, and it's not a program that's, you know, that a lot of people, because I think what you're going to see is as the police reform really starts hitting some of the municipalities, they're going to be looking for something like this, and we're trying to get ahead of the curve, so, you know, we can get in there first, and so, you know, we can train others, probably other municipalities as well. I'm not sure how the chief has that worked out, but that's my understanding of it so far.
Shelby?
Sergeant Daniels, you may not be able to answer this at this time, but do you envision that the training that is offered here, I know that's sort of a train-the-trainer module, that some of that training, even in a light version, might be offered to, you know, or sharing of that training, I guess, might be offered to the community as an extension of the work the police will do to train their own staff?
That's a good question. I
So you
don't.
don't feel like you have to answer it, but that might be a follow-on for this group.
Yeah.
And for the, you know, so that it's great that you guys are going to get trained. I love it, very supportive of it, but I think it's important for the community to understand what is that training, and you know, and I know we're going to get into town assessment and training needs, but there may
Right.
be some benefit there for town staff down the road.
Okay, I'll definitely look into that. I'll check in with the chief and I'll let you know.
I'll also say before I forget, and as it's related, that Chief Lori will be joining us at our June meeting to talk about the body worn cameras, which did pass at town meeting last week. And also he's prepared to field other questions that we have related to the work that we're doing. So this might also be something to bring to him then.
Yeah, just FYI, I have to plug Shelby's show, Frank and Mary, because the chief and I we were on that a couple weeks ago, and it was awesome, and actually went by too quick, I felt. So, but yeah, it'll be something similar to that.
Kara, we can maybe for folks can watch that show in advance, so it might get through some of the presentation questions, or we can really get into maybe some questions that otherwise might be glossed over, you know, just in an overview. So I can provide that to you as a link or to the group.
That would be really helpful to send that to the group, or to me, and I'll send it to the group. That would be great. Thank you. I know I've been on Frank and Mary too, and it flies by.
One thing, not to get ahead of us in future agendas, but Chief Lori gave a great presentation to the board, and actually, Mike, I think you were there as well, on the police car colors. It was a great presentation. I'll send the link as well from Westborough TV, like why are the police cars black and the shaded windows. And I learned a lot from the presentation that they gave to the Board of Selectmen. And I know that's been a question that's come up because the cars kind of feel very like dark and militant, and what is that all about? So being that we might bring that up as well in our conversation in June, I'd be happy to send that to you. I see Jeff is sending links to us in the chat, everyone. So, but I'll be sure to send those links to you separately.
Thank you. Kim.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, do you want a motion to support the letter, or to provide a letter of support?
I would really appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay. So I move
May
that I move that we provide a letter of support to the application whatever the actual full name of the program is.
The
I
ABLE
just closed
project.
it. What was that? I'm sorry, I just closed the
Oh,
document.
it's okay. The ABLE project.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks, Kim and Mike. I will go around with a vote. Rana,
Rappaport, yes.
Shelby,
Marshall, yes.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Shazia.
Tariq, yes. I'd also like to thank the police station too for being proactive about this.
Mike,
Daniels, yes.
Sarah,
Connors, yes.
Ema,
Ness, yes.
and Alma,
Yes.
and Presley, yes. Before we move to the next agenda item, are there any points that any of you suggest that I include in a letter of support? And if you think of some, I won't be writing it until probably Mondays or Tuesday. So feel free to send it to me by then. All right.
Thanks for
Awesome.
writing that, Kara, on behalf of the
Yeah.
committee.
It will probably be simple and short, but I think to the point. All right. Does anyone have any other community issues or announcements that they'd like to bring forward? I feel like Kim, didn't you and I talk about something that we were going to bring up at? Okay,
Well,
Shelby,
you-
you go.
Well,
Yeah,
while you guys are thinking about what you might want, I just wanted to update folks that may have not been at town meeting, which actually went very quickly, surprisingly. But in addition to the body worn cameras passing and a number of other articles, you can certainly read that in the warrant or watch it on Westborough TV. If you just have endless amounts of time to watch town meeting. But I'm also happy to report that the name of the selectman was officially changed to select board. So we are now select board members as opposed to select men. And that actually required like 3 different articles because of had to change in the charter, et cetera. So I don't think offhand there were any other articles that sort of would be germane to this group that we need to talk about, but
yeah, I agree. And Kim, I just thought of the thing we talked about. Kim and I were just recalling that sometime back, it was actually before Kim came on board, and it was before I was an official member, there was a lot of conversations about religious objects on the Rotary. And we didn't ever get to a point of recommendation or resolution around that. So this is just my official putting it back on our radar. I mean, we included it in the list of stuff we read off last month, but I just think that as the holidays, I mean, we're still not even in summer yet, but it's going to come up and it's going to come quicker than we think. So I think that maybe we just kind of keep that at the front of our parking lot to take on sooner than later. Shelby?
yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that a little bit in that at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, there was a discussion about the placement of signs in the Rotary. So not signs like you're standing there for, political action or protest or whatever, but leaving a stake sign and then walking away. So it's been longstanding policy of the town to not allow that except to announce town meetings, and it's very limited in scope. So this just came up recently, and the board has agreed to take up the policy to reevaluate that because it's so short and because of some past practices, people, there are groups that have posted signs. Notably, you'll notice right now the veterans where it says remembering our veterans. I think that's what the signs say. And so we're taking that up. So I would envision maybe the work of this committee feeding into that policy, even though that's about signs, it very well could be inclusive of objects in general. So let's keep that in mind for the timeline that coincides with the board.
So can I
Thank
just,
you.
Shelby, can I just ask, is that for people standing on the Rotary with signs or for just?
No,
putting the
Just the
signs in the ground and
standalone-
walking away from them.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Not like if you're there to, like, obviously, a lot of folks were out protesting in support of Black Lives Matter, et cetera. That's fine. You want to hold the sign, that's fine, but you're holding onto the sign or it's leaning against you. Or when you're there for political purposes, you're holding your campaign sign. But this is like leaving a sign and walking away for it to be on display for, unattended. So that it just needs, the policy needs to be updated. It was last written in, I don't know, I forget the date offhand.
So my other question, Shelby, and you might be able to answer this. It was in the newspaper a while back that the Rotary Club, I believe, was putting a bunch of money into decorating downtown for the
That's correct.
holidays. How is that going to impact?
Yep. So the Rotary Club is supporting an initiative for downtown holiday winter season lighting. And, I don't want to be sort of naive to say that it doesn't coincide with some religious holidays, as well as I'd say commercial holidays at times. But the decorations are not, they're intended to be up and really as much for downtown beautification as they are to kind of celebrate, what folks would normally think of perhaps as Christmas. There has not been a decision made about like Santa's arrival and use of the Rotary or a different location for that or anything else. So that's separate, but the downtown holiday lighting has been approved by the board for the Rotary to do that and to improve upon what's always been there.
Is this any different than what has been in previous years?
The lighting, yes. So, and I don't want to get too off topic here, just because I know it wasn't an agenda
Okay.
item, but I'm happy. Why don't I do this? Why don't I sort of summarize where the board landed and then send it out to the group? Just so you can kind of review it and then maybe at a future meeting. I just don't want to get into a debate.
I understand. And in doing that, Shelby, can you refer also to what the similarities or differences in previous years?
Sure. Yep.
Thank
I'll
you.
do that. Yep.
Thank you, Shelby. That's really helpful.
Yep.
All right. Anything else for community issues and announcements? All right. I just want to acknowledge a community issue that has arisen, I think, since we last met, which in our neighboring town of Hopkinton, which is the death of Michaela Miller. And we all know that her death and the circumstances around it have stirred much controversy across the Commonwealth, and actually I would say across the country in some circles, and that there is no official cause of death at this point stated because an investigation is ongoing. But I bring it to the table because certainly some of the things that have been brought up have to do with Michaela's race and Michaela's sexual orientation and how that has played into the response to her death. And so I just want to acknowledge that our hearts ache anytime someone dies in a tragic way like Michaela did, regardless of exactly how that happened. And that the fact that we lost another person of color and another member of the LGBTQ community, that some people, it feels very personal for them and it feels very close to home. And this is the second LGBTQ youth of color who has passed away in Hopkinton in the last couple of years. And so I just know that certain members of the community are really feeling it. And I just, as a diversity inclusion committee, want to extend our care and our compassion and our hopes for clarity for everyone involved, and just know that that's on our minds. Rana?
I recently read that the medical examiner said that declared that the death was by suicide.
Okay, I had not read the latest.
Oh, yeah, within the last
Yeah,
2 days.
thank you. Okay.
That was what the avowal is, that
Okay.
she died
All right.
sadly, of course, by suicide.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I don't want to get into any of the debates. I know that they're painful and and very personal for a lot of people. And I want to make sure I validate everyone's experience and perspective on it. And if indeed the death was by suicide, which certainly I believe you that that's what was determined, we also know that we're in the midst of a mental health crisis. And I hope that you all got to see the letter that I sent out to the community, sort of acknowledging the hopefulness that is in the air, and also acknowledging that we do have a mental health crisis on our hands, and we want to be very caring to ourselves and to each other, and make sure that we have the support and resources we need. So,
Amen.
and when you add on top of that experiences of marginalization because of race or other aspects of identity, the mental health stressors can increase and be exacerbated. So just also want to acknowledge that and know that there are resources such as Youth and Family Services here to provide support to residents.
Sarah, can I just say one quick thing? First of all, I
Yeah.
want to thank you for that eloquent sharing of what is
I second that.
in too many ways a tragic situation. But I also call this as a reminder to this committee, and let's not lose sight of what is a parking lot item, which is someone's great idea on this committee, I forgot who, to really think about sort of our like kind of crisis response as a community when things happen. I think we talked about this at our last meeting, like what sort of, obviously a lot of that work would stem from the key departments that we immediately think of, the Youth and Family Services and our public safety teams, et cetera. But what sort of toolkits might be available, or resources, or how do we come together as a community in response? So not as an action item right now, but sadly these situations create those opportunities to be better should that ever prevail upon us. Carrie, you're on mute.
I was talking to my kids, actually. They're homesick today.
The nature of it. Actually, there was just an NPR article on women and working, and the crisis that has created as a result of
Talk about the mental health stress. Yes.
Yeah.
They've been sick all week. It's not COVID, but you go back to school.
Yep.
There you go. Masks, no masks. The child bugs have started spreading.
Right.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. I have a question. I wonder if Sarah might sort of know the answer to this. Has the death in Hopkinton affected high school kids in Westborough, and has any work needed to be done around this? Actually, Carrie, you would know about this too.
I can't speak to the actual students up at the high school, but I did take Kara's letter and have it printed and brought it over to the high school and gave it to the front desk to ask them to give it to the counselor to send out to any of the students that might need those resources directly in their hands rather than just through an email. So the pamphlet did go out at the high school. I'm not sure if it went to every student, but I do know it was in the hands of the counselor.
Thank you, Sarah. And I've asked Amber Bach to the superintendent to distribute my letter as well. She was out sick as well a few days. So I'm hoping that gets distributed through the school district.
It went out to all families.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. I've been kind of out the last couple of days a little bit. So, but Rana, you asked about the high school. I became aware of this tragedy, Michaela's death, far before it hit the press. And I let Superintendent Bach know about it. And she and some of the other leadership kind of sent out some quick response to particularly vulnerable students immediately. And then, we've just been talking kind of behind the scenes ongoing about how they're just keeping an eye on folks are doing. Yeah. In Hopkinton, they've had crisis intervention brought in and are still working with folks from Riverside with that. Okay, moving on to the crux of our meeting is the work that we've been doing on the side. And thank you all for spending time with me on the side to get going on some of these efforts. So just to recap, we had decided to prioritize 3 items at this time and to spend some concentrated time on them outside of these meetings. And those were our recommendation to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday to replace Columbus Day. The second was to really drive our efforts to improve language access across town services. And the third was the idea we came up with last month to encourage the select board to do some kind of organizational assessment to see where we need to go with the diversity, equity, and inclusion work in the town. So we had meetings for all of those efforts. I'm going to give a really quick little summary of what I know and then turn it over to a couple of you to give a little more detail. And then we'll talk more in depth about the organizational assessment piece. So to start with the language access piece, Shelby and Sarah and I met about that, and we kind of recounted the conversations we've had in this committee talking about little ways, very easy and accessible ways that certain departments could start piloting some efforts to improve language access. And we agreed that those would be helpful suggestions for us to pass along to the board. But we also acknowledge that a comprehensive language access plan is something that would require a deeper dive into understanding what people are doing, what the needs are, and then looking at what systems need to be in place. And so Sarah and Shelby and I agreed that we would include looking at language access as part of the larger organizational assessment and starting that way. So that's where we landed. Sarah or Shelby, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
I just want to touch base on sort of what I think might be some early wins in progress, and that would be that we talked about, and I think that might be something we decide as a group that we want to recommend this to the board. I think we could have some early wins by creating translation capability, if you will, on our website, on our town's website, for whether it be an agenda or maybe not so much a meeting like this, because that would require active translation, but certainly for minutes and agendas, that those be translatable through a service, so that, or programs like the rec program, etc. So some of our departments are already doing that, so the capability exists, but it would be great to see that in a more uniform way across across the town's website, which is increasingly a mainstream form of communication. So I would just recommend that we include that as sort of low-hanging fruit.
Sarah?
I did check in with my interim principals about what we have been using for the newsletters. And I actually was wrong. It's not a program. They actually are just doing through Google Docs. There's a button that you can hit that just says translate document, which wouldn't really help us with the town website, but it could help us with things such as minutes and little documents that go out to the public. It's just an easy, in the Google Doc, it's just translate document, it's just a button, and then it will translate the whole thing using Google Translate, which I've found definitely over the last couple of years is pretty effective and does usually make sense, and at least in the Spanish language. But that's all they're using. And then they just link the documents that are in different languages. So the top will say like Spanish translation, Arabic translation. So unfortunately, it isn't a system that they're using, but if everything was typed into Google Docs, it could still be translated easily.
So my intention is that whatever recommendation we make to the board about sort of larger scale organizational assessment, that we have kind of a sub recommendation about, while we're waiting for sort of large scale recommendations and a strategic plan for how to implement widespread language access, we can meanwhile do some of these steps and give a list of what those steps are. And anecdotally, I will tell you that since Youth and Family Services started using a language bank, a telephonic language interpreter for all of our services, we've passed along information about that to 3 other departments. So it is slowly spreading and people are seeing the need for it and asking for it. So it's, you know, there is some progress happening. All right, Indigenous Peoples Day. We're going to make a recommendation for it, but we're slowing down the process a little bit based on some research that Mike did. Mike, which we sent you some written information. I hope you had a chance to look at it, but Mike, do you want to do a brief summary of where we stand and what we covered?
Sure. I don't think I read what you sent me, but
I sent the stuff that you sent out, so it's all stuff you wrote.
Oh, okay, no problem. All right, so basically I'll just go off of that. I mean, so some of the research that I did as part of the subcommittee was to really just look at other municipalities and jurisdictions that have Indigenous Peoples Day. And what I came across was a representative of the United American Indians of New England and also Indigenous Peoples Day of Massachusetts. This person's name is Matoan Monroe. So she heads both organizations, and she's been instrumental in helping, I think, 16 communities. I think it's actually 18 now, with transitioning the municipalities from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. So right now, we're kind of at a standstill because obviously her schedule is very busy. She's in high demand right now. So the last email that I got is that she was going to give me a list of dates because her schedule has been pretty full as of late, so that we can all sit down and meet with her. I'm not opposed to meeting with her on my own, so we can expedite the process instead of getting everyone together to try and facilitate it. But Rana and Sarah made a couple of recommendations, or had a few questions that I thought we should start off with. One of them was, you know, to talk about or to ask her about any educational programs that would help us in our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Also, any promotional material for social media, local media outlets, and then, you know, of course, what type of, you know, pushback or resistance have we seen throughout the community, or has she seen throughout the communities, just so that we know and we're prepared. So, but again, if we can't get together with her soon, you know, maybe, you know, we should probably still at least do something. I don't know what shape that takes, but, you know, I think we should definitely, you know, at least do something informational with whatever information we can gather outside of what she provides us. So that's pretty much it at this point.
Thank you, Mike. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think, you know, the schools have already made the change on their calendar for Indigenous Peoples Day, and that is in the context of curriculum changes that have already occurred. So classrooms, kids are already learning in the schools about Indigenous Peoples Day and learning differently about Columbus. And I think if we change the holiday as a town, the community is going to want to understand the change, and some people won't automatically understand that. Shazia, did you raise your hand? I don't know. Okay. That's all right. Yeah, Kim.
Mike, is the FAQ that's in the email that came from the consultant you were hoping to connect with?
Yes, it actually came off of I think I sent a link
The website?
to
Yeah.
her website. And
No, because I think that's if you're unable to connect schedule wise, I think that's a great starting point. If they allow us to use that information and to republish it, I think there's a lot of really good information right there.
Okay. All right.
Agreed, yeah. And I think it can be an ongoing educational process too. I mean, if we should give some FAQ type of thing at the time that the change is announced, but as we near the holiday itself, we can roll out. And that'll give us time to research and gather more information. Thanks. I enjoyed my conversations with y'all about that stuff so much. I just want to say, Shelby.
Yeah, so I also reached out to our representatives and senator to understand sort of what their thoughts were about about the bills that are currently in the actually in the House right now. I don't think that there's an accompanying Senate bill right now, but it's was referred to the Joint Committee for Administrative Regulatory Oversight or something like that. Some very long title, but it's in committee for review. And so my question to them was severalfold, but including how quickly do you anticipate that coming out of committee favorably this time? Because it died last time in committee. And do they have sort of thoughts or recommendations on it? So I'll continue to follow up on that as well, because I think that I think it's important that Westborough consider this change. I think that the bigger change is when the bigger rock gets thrown into the pond, right? And that is the state recognizes it as opposed to communities doing it one by one. Not that that's not equally as important.
Thanks for doing that, Shelby. All right, anything else on Indigenous Peoples Day? Sorry, let me say one more thing. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to go ahead and make a request to get on the select board's agenda to start talking about some of these things. Indigenous Peoples Day, I think I'm going to request to talk about separate from the larger organizational assessment stuff that we're talking about, and try to get on sooner than later, because I know once we hit summer or if we need to do it during summer, it's sporadic. So I'll make an effort now, and then hopefully we'll have whatever we need to have together. And that might be before our next meeting, in which case we may want to throw together an outline of a recommendation.
Kara, so I'm sorry, because originally we felt like we were going to make a recommendation at this meeting so that we could be on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen's meeting next week. That's what I recall.
That was our effort.
Yeah, and obviously the school committee has already, they've gone forward with their vote. So are you thinking more toward like June 8th?
You tell me what you think, folks. I don't, that was our original thinking, and it's not unrealistic, except that when we met as a small group, we did decide that we wanted to make some effort to get this consultation if we could. So
Kim,
yeah.
If you can help out here, I mean, not to sound insensitive about this potential change, but my mind as a selectman immediately goes to sort of the administration of it. What's we can make a change and sort of in good spirit and faith, but then I go, what kind of work does that mean for our town staff? And what does it mean for union contracts? And does it open up for, negotiations or what have you? So I did a little bit of work on that, but I guess my question is to you, Kim, if this committee through Kara met with the board either on the 8th or the 22nd of June, does that allow town staff to make, if there are letters that need to be created or discussions that need to be had with town departments, does that give enough time with respect to, October being the date?
I believe it would. I don't think there are many places where this comes up other than perhaps, the few that jump to mind are posted calendars of, it's a holiday that the town offices are closed. But I'm not thinking of other, and where it's listed in contracts and personnel policies, I don't see an issue with that.
Okay.
I don't see that. And I'm trying to think of other places where it's probably mostly going to be in calendars, in departmental calendars, those types of places that we would need to
Yeah.
find it.
Okay. And Sarah or Kim, do you know offhand, I did not have a chance to go back and watch the second school committee, because I watched one on the 28th where the 27th where they voted on the change. But then I think at a subsequent meeting, because I think it was originally voted as Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day. Was that vote then amended at a subsequent meeting, Sarah, do you know, to just be Indigenous Peoples Day? Or Kim, do you know?
I don't know.
I don't know about the meeting, but I will say the calendar for next year just says Indigenous Peoples Day. There's
Okay.
no mention of Columbus.
Okay, then that's the answer. If it's on the calendar, that makes it official. That or someone just typed it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so
So-
Kara, I think that, not to hijack the conversation here, but I think that this committee has the benefit of time, even to push it out as far as the 22nd, to allow for what I think is this very important conversation that will inform this committee.
Right. That's really what we needed to hear. So I think that let's do that. I think we can come to our meeting. I mean, our next meeting's on the 17th of June. And so that gives us 4 business days to, actually, Kim, you were telling me that the packet for the board has to be put together the day before our meeting.
Yeah, we should probably try to meet before then, or at least
Okay.
Kara, knowing, we should try to meet.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to, and that's on the agenda today too, to talk about upcoming meetings. So maybe we'll try to meet a week earlier in June. All right, keep that in your minds for later today.
Can I just get clarification? So the work to be done, is it more to round out the presentation and some additional background information to go with the recommendation that the town change?
Yeah,
I guess I'm trying to figure out, could we as a committee today take a vote? And with the understanding, would it be with the small group to kind of flush out the details and get it ready to go before the board?
sure. I mean, I absolutely trust the competence of the small group to get the work done and get the recommendation written.
I'm
Mike
just
is
trying to
on-
figure out if that helps with the meeting, with the timing and
Sure.
having something, taking a
Yeah.
little pressure off of a full committee meeting ahead of the,
Yeah.
the board meets on June 8th. The agenda would typically be posted the week before, so that Thursday or Friday at the latest.
Let's do that because that gives us the flexibility. So I think that's.
So Kara, will you ask, because we can have up to
Yeah.
what, 4 people, right?
Yeah, it's right now it's Mike, Sarah, Rana, and I was there too, although I might retract myself from that subgroup if somebody else would like to. I'm happy to give some, sign off and whatever. But yeah, we aren't coming close to a quorum. I think we're fine.
Okay.
Sarah,
I'm
you,
I'm happy to help if folks want that help on that committee.
all right. I know Mike's on duty, so he said he might have to step off at points, but Sarah and Rana, how do you feel about that for us to take a vote to put the work in the hands of the subgroup and then have the subgroup with my help present it to the board?
Definitely. Sure. Yep.
All right.
So we would need to have the presentation done probably Wednesday, June 2nd. Is that the? Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, for the June 8th meeting.
For the June
Sure.
8th one. Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right, so may I have a motion to allow the subgroup to make the recommendations and do the research and make the recommendations that will be formally presented to the Board of Selectmen at the June 8th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it, but I'm going to amend the motion.
Okay,
So I think that, Memorial Day, not to be like, Memorial Day is the 31st. We want a presentation to get done by the 2nd. I don't know what folks, that really effectively gives us a week to do this and to hear back from the slate.
yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
So
And
I
Mike
think-
is the point of contact and he's not here for this discussion, so.
Right. Well, and he was very clear that she's very busy and she's gonna, so I personally, given that we have time and although, the school committee is, I worry about sort of lagging behind too far, but it is what it is. We're already where we're at. So I recommend we shoot for the 22nd of June. So I would amend your motion to just say in preparation for the June 22nd meeting.
So,
Somebody say that so I can write it down.
Sorry, Alma.
all right, who would like to restate the motion?
So I think the motion, Alma, is, this is Shelby, I think the motion is that to approve, to allow for a subgroup to work on the presentation that will be prepared for the Board of Selectmen presentation on the 22nd.
Of June.
All right,
Of
June
June.
26th.
Kim,
And should we just be explicit that this committee formally recommends that the board adopt changing the name from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day? Can we just work that verbiage into it?
That's a good
Yes.
point, Kim. Yes.
yes, thank you.
And good call, Shelby. I keep thinking we have a lot more time before we hit the end of May.
It's like all of a sudden it's, yeah. So that's a great point. So effectively, we're voting in this motion, not only to approve the subgroup, but as a committee, we're supporting that change.
I'm just gonna give Alma a minute to write, and I also want to acknowledge that Alma is part of this committee too. She was on vacation when we met in person, but she contributed for ahead of going and will be part of the, not the committee, the group, going forward. And I'll make sure I communicate this to Mike. All right, Alma, are you ready for a vote?
I am.
Okay, let's start with Shelby.
Marshall, yes.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Shazia,
Tariq, yes.
Sarah,
Connors, yes.
Rana,
Rappaport, yep.
Ema,
Yes, yes.
Alma,
Yes.
and Presley, yes.
Kara, I hate to keep hearing my voice, as I'm sure others do, but Kara, you and I have had some good conversations about this topic. And subsequent to that, I've done a fair amount of research, and I'm still getting there on my affirmative vote, yes. But what has been, I think, sort of the experience, and I hope that others will find this as well, is we do our work for the community and educate them. And so that they have the space and time to think about this change. It is amazing to me how many states, not other towns in Massachusetts, that might be like, oh, well, of course, Amherst did that, and and Cambridge, and all, in whatever conclusions some people might draw about communities. States across the country have adopted this change. States like Alaska and Hawaii and Maine and New Mexico, Oregon, South Dakota, and Vermont, and even places like North Carolina and Oklahoma and Alabama. And so I think through education and understanding, and for me, it's very, very important that we never erase history, but we recognize history, and we recognize what we've learned as we evolve through learning history. And so I think this is an important step forward. It's one I think that, someone like myself is sort of, I feel like I'm walking on ice a little bit, and I don't say that in a political sense. I just, in my core, I feel like it's an important step forward, but we have to do it thoughtfully, because we're never, I think about like trying to convince a kid, like, you just have to do it this way, right? This is the new way forward. And, human nature doesn't like that. We need to understand it. We need to process it, whatever it is. So thank you for the opportunity to just kind of share kind of my personal journey here. And I hope that others will undertake that over time.
Thank you, Shelby. I appreciate that a lot. This is not the first meeting this week I've been a part of where we have reflected on our journeys of learning around these issues. Like it is absolutely a process, and we have to respect every stage of the process. Kim?
Just to that point, I assume that it will be made very, well, I don't want to assume, it's a question. When this goes to the board, is this committee interested in having a continued role in that educational component? Because we'll basically have the summer months and early fall to, again, I was just looking at some of the information that I think came from Mike's email and that FAQ. Even if we took that, turned it into, you know, a document and could provide things in various venues, that might be helpful. So I personally would be interested in the committee, if it's interested, taking on that educational role, a piece of it.
I think that could be incredibly powerful to be an official town committee that is backing this education. Just, you know, sort of, it just strengthens the effort and gives an
Maybe we know
explanation.
somebody who has a show on Westborough TV and we could go on and do it there.
I might have a connection or two.
Maybe.
And I was thinking too, that we need to be very careful because, and we need to be very precise when we do this. And I agree with Shelby, you can't just pretend history didn't happen and move on to something else, because I would not want this to become part of the cancel culture. You know, there's a reason why this is being done, and these are the reasons why, you know what I mean? Like, we need to be really specific in our points about why we're requesting the selectmen do this.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I agree.
think this actually could be, you know, it could be a fun Frank and Mary conversation. And I don't mean fun as in silly, but it could be a fun conversation. I'm sure our friends at Westborough TV, I'd be more than happy to put together something. There may be a student that we can tap into that's interested in putting together like a little vignette video. So I'll work with Karen and team over there to see if they have any connections and put some feelers out there. But I think it could be a great way to educate the community and bring everyone along to understand, you know, again, the history and why the change.
And it educates the community about what we're doing too as a committee, which I think is important. Rana.
Wasn't there, this whole discussion in this committee started because we were presented, there was a group of people who were already public wanting to do this. So they would be the people, I would imagine, that should be approached, because first of all, if I was them and found somebody else doing it and didn't consult me, I'd really be pissed. And they, you know, they're the people that really, for whom this was their heart and soul. So
Yeah, that's a great point, Rana. I'll reach out to.
I don't remember who the group.
Yeah, I think it was
Sarah McCabe.
Yeah.
Was the one who came and did a presentation for us. And
But she represented a group. She wasn't an individual. She was she was the spokesperson for a group of people, as far as I remember. And if I remember that, it's amazing that I remember.
It's remarkable. She
Remarkable.
represented a group who started a petition. And so, yes, and Sarah came and gave a presentation with us on behalf of that group who sponsored the petition. So I think Sarah would probably be the appropriate person to reach out to, but maybe not the only person who would be able to provide us with some of that support and education.
Right.
Kim.
So I just have one more thought or question. So at the point at which we do take this to the board, and if the board is supportive of this, is it also worth asking the board, either if the board or this committee further reach out to perhaps the Mass Municipal Association, and if there are other entities to encourage that the state take this on?
That is a good question. I can think of one forum where I may be able to learn a little bit more about that. I have been invited to be a part of an informal group of diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders in municipalities across the state who are now meeting every month to talk about what is happening. And they're trying to formalize some of this work on the state level with the,
Well,
is that?
I'm just
what you're
thinking because it
talking
is
about?
in committee, it's
Yeah.
there are other legislative issues that the town has advocated for.
Oh, okay.
And oftentimes it's through the Mass Municipal Association
Okay.
because they're the voice of the 351 cities and towns. And I don't know if it would be appropriate for this committee to have direct contact with the MMA, or perhaps to request that the board also follow up with the MMA and express support for the legislation that's in committee.
Why don't we include that in our recommendation to the board to say that please, please forward this recommendation on behalf of the town to the Mass Municipal Association to legislate on, for the state legislative changes. Would that be appropriate for us to include it in our recommendation?
Yeah, I think it's, and I think it's up to this committee to say, do we want to do it? Do we want the board to do it? I think that the board, personally, I think the board should do it with the town manager sending that off, that, through this process. This is what the board is recommending on behalf of the town.
I agree.
So that might be a next step bullet point on this slide. Presentation to the board.
Okay.
I know we have a motion and a second that was amended from Kara's original motion, but in thinking about the school committee vote and questions, do we need to be more specific that this recognition is in place of Columbus Day, or it's / and the only reason why I say / is because of that, the contractual components that I referenced that are in contracts that we don't know necessarily, or I don't know offhand what those contracts look like. And I do, other than I know that they recognize Columbus Day as a holiday. So just sort of administratively.
I would say we recommend the change in holiday to replace Columbus Day because, as far as the reasons that advocates across the country are promoting this change, part of the reasons include the explicit removal of Columbus Day as a holiday. So I think that we should make that, acknowledging that the Board of Selectmen in their process of implementing such a change may come across some administrative things that need to be tweaked. And the Board of Selectmen will make the decisions that they need to make to implement this in the different ways, but it doesn't mean they can't change it on the calendar. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the Board of Selectmen can change it to whatever they want, but it still remains a federal holiday. So unless the feds change it, then it's, even if the state of Massachusetts changes it, it's in order, it's still going to be called Columbus Day by the federal government. So
Unless they, that's interesting. That's interesting.
we need to be cognizant of that part of it too.
Well, I think that we can be cognizant. I mean, we are recommending to the select board that we change the holiday in all the ways in which we have the power to change the holiday. And if we can't change it in those other forums.
And maybe that's what we need to say in our preparation, that we ask that you take a look at this. These are our reasonings. This is what we'd like you to do, and that you change it in all the ways that you can change it. Like I said, it's still a federal holiday, so.
Right. I just want, Alma, for you to have, you and everyone else here that's going, what are we talking about here? To have the right motion, that we all understand actually what we're voting for in support of the group doing the work that ultimately will appear before the board.
Okay, my
so what
suggestion is that
my
both Kim and Shelby rescind their original motions and we start from scratch. How's that?
That's fine with me. So moved.
So be it. Motions
Motion
off the
scratched.
table. All right, may I have a new motion regarding the changing of Indigenous Peoples' Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day holiday?
I'll take a crack at it.
All right, I have faith in you, Kim.
Okay, so this, let me try this approach, that we recommend that the select board adopt, this is the part I'm thinking through, adopt a name change for the federal holiday currently recognized as Columbus Day. More specifically, the second Monday in October, and that the town of Westborough recognize that day as Indigenous Peoples Day.
That was good.
Almost
May
make my
I?
grammar look better.
May I have a
And-
second? Oh,
And that
Wait,
sub-
all right. I got excited.
Indigenous peoples.
do we want the piece about the subgroup will prepare a presentation for the board's June 22nd meeting?
I would say, and that the subcommittee prepare the presentation for the selectmen for their June, whichever meeting that was.
June 22nd.
I would just drop the June 22nd, so that way
Oh.
if it doesn't happen, that they
Yep.
prefer.
Upcoming and upcoming.
Okay,
Thanks.
You imagine how
Let us
long
know.
it takes bills in Congress?
Alma, how's your confidence that you got it?
all right, I'm gonna read it back.
Okay.
Kim made a motion to recommend that the select board adopt the name change of the federal holiday known as Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day for the town of Westborough, and that the subcommittee prepare the presentation for an upcoming select board meeting.
It's great. The only word to change is instead of subcommittee, just say working group,
Okay,
just because the word committee has all kinds of meaning.
And I'd also throw in there, Kim had the October 12 date as well, so somewhere
The
in there.
second,
The
Monday.
second Monday.
second
Yep.
Monday. Okay,
Columbus Day, some observed, or the holiday observed the second Monday in October.
okay, I got it. All right, second.
Who would like to second it?
I just
Rana.
did. Oh,
I
sorry.
seconded.
Rana. All right.
Good job.
Great job. We are ready for a vote. Shelby,
Partially, yes.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Shazia. I saw her mouth yes, even though your mute is on. It's okay. We got it. Sarah,
Connors, yes.
Rana.
Rappaport, yes.
Alma?
Shazia's back.
Oh, hi, Shazia. Yes.
Got it, yes.
Okay, Alma
Yes,
and Presley, yes. I just want to say too that we'll have that ready for the plan is to have that ready for the June 22nd board meeting, which means it has to be in the packet on Wednesday, the 16th. We are scheduled to meet as a committee on Thursday, the 17th. And what I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kim and Shelby, that if we make a tweak to the draft presentation that we give to them on the 16th, that's okay. As long as we have okay, yeah. So if after meeting with this committee, we decide to tweak a few things, it's okay, as long as the board has the bulk of it to review prior to the 22nd.
So my understanding is that the working group needs to meet before the next committee.
Correct,
Okay,
correct. So I will send an email to the working group to spur that meeting to be scheduled.
thank you, Kara.
Sure. All right. Now, we are not left with a lot of time to talk about the next topic, which is a heavy one, but let's introduce it. Let's review the outline that I introduced, and then let's figure out where we want to go with it for the next steps. This will require more conversation than we have today. I am going to share this outline with folks. All right, can you all see the document? On
Indeed.
on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we have some poor little sniffly noses in the background here. All right, so long story short, it's not, I mean, it's not short, but I will summarize really quickly. We have had all these ideas about how to approach improvement with diversity, equity, and inclusion in town. And we realize that it's hard for us as lay people, as not experts in this field, to make recommendations confidently that will be systemic and lasting. Therefore, we determined that we wanted to talk about recommending to the select board a larger organizational assessment to determine where we are and where we should go with this stuff. So I met with Ryan, Shazia, and Ema separately because none of us could find a time to meet together. And we determined, hold on just a second. Sorry, it's noisy here. I'm gonna try to move. why don't you take a look at the document while I'm on mute for a minute? Okay, just had a solicitor come to the door during this meeting. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm just gonna go through this real quick. I don't, not word for word, but just to overview what Shazia and Ryan and Ema and I have come up with, and then to get your input. I have shared this with you in two forms. It's the same in both forms, a Google Doc, and which basically means that people who access it can make comments and change it in real time, and in a Word document. They're exactly the same, it's just two different ways to look at it. But this does mean it could be a living document in the Google Doc and people can make comments on it all the time. You'll see that I made little bubble comments on the side, and that appears in the Word doc as well. So so this is kind of our thinking, is before we launch into a recommendation, we give the select board some background as to why it would be helpful to look at the big picture. Specifically why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important. Here's just some bulleted things that we came up with. And you can see that I put, again, we don't have time to discuss this today, but I really do want your input. Like, we've all heard anecdotes from either residents or employees about, ooh, this thing happened, it was bad. And it's not, doesn't mean it's dominant of everything that's happening in the town, but it's real life. So one of my questions is, do we want to mention that?
So Kara, the first thing I think the first section is missing, and maybe just elaborating on the first bullet, is speaking to Westborough's demographics presently, not where we've come from, but the what the mix is of our community. I would include that in some way. We have that through, I think, census data. We certainly have it through school data. But yeah. And then my only, I'm not here to debate the other two bullet points, but I'm not sure that we can prove the second. I don't know where that comes from. So that there may be a different way to work that. Again, we don't have to wordsmith it here, but I can do that. I'm happy to offer a comment offline. And then if we have anecdotal, I worry a little bit about anecdotal stories leading that message here. Again, I don't want to take away from them, because if it's already a group that doesn't feel like they have equitable voice, then the anecdotal stories, we don't want to depress those, if you will, or suppress them. But at the same time, I'm not sure, there may be another place to insert that. Maybe it's during the presentation to the board. Like, here's an example
it very
of what
well
we've
could
heard.
be. So what I'd love is for more people to weigh in on that question and give their thoughts about the pros and cons. Shelby, the issues you answered are exactly the questions that I have, and you know what weight that would have or not have if it's there. So to be just further discussed. And then now, why the D&I committee? Oh, sorry.
I just want to go back a second.
Oh, sure, Rana.
Saying anecdotal stories doesn't hold a lot of weight.
No.
Anecdotal stories are, anybody could do anything at any time. If there are real examples, then there need to be real examples. To say that anecdotally, you could anecdotally say anything. It's not, that's my opinion in any case.
Yeah. Thanks. It's a very good point.
In this, I'll be very brief. I think a way to potentially flip it is to say we want to avoid why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important. I think that bullet could frame it as you want to avoid experiences where this happens.
Nice. That's part of that. Yeah.
So can I ask why, do we need to change our name? Because I know in some other towns is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, not just Diversity and Inclusion.
Will you write that as a parking lot issue, please? I think it's worth revisiting. I don't want to dismiss you at all. I think that's an important question that's come up a lot. I want to share, because I don't know how far we'll get in this, that in this process, I've been reaching out to a lot of other towns to see what kind of DEI work they're doing. And I've learned a lot. Lots of towns are doing this work, and they're doing it in all kinds of different ways. And you'll see later in the document some ways in that I've learned about. And there's all kinds of different names for different kinds of committees and efforts, but through the process, certainly that word equity, which isn't included in our language, is something that's come up. So let's put that in the parking lot for a not too far off in the future conversation. All right. Why the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and the town's leadership have a responsibility to include DEI in town services and government. These are just sort of my learning bullets, so, take them or leave them, but there must be a cultural shift on all levels. Change won't happen without the leadership setting the precedent and facilitating the change. And a cultural shift led by the town government will impact a cultural shift in the town overall. Sort of just sort of those persuasive things to, in really trying to elicit people's engagement. Next, I just put our statement of purpose for our committee, and I made a link to the strategic plan, because when you read the town's strategic plan, there is embedded in that conversation about inclusion of all members of the town. And in some of the goals that are within the strategic plan, I know some of the goals for Alma's department and mine, for example, include outreach to communities that have historically not been engaged in town process. So, I want to kind of make the case that this is not new. This is all, part of like another layer of work that's already being done and is slated to be done as a priority for the town.
Eric, can I just add one more thing as at the top here, there's under the examples. So again, I know we spend a lot of time, as we should, talking about racism, but there are lots of other groups that are, so you just mentioned ageism, could be whatever, so.
Wait till you see the next section, Shelby. How about that? So these are how I've summarized the recommendations our little subgroup has come up. It's kind of a twofold, and I don't think you can see them both on the screen at the same time. Let's see, maybe. Number one, to hire a consultant to work with the town's leadership and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to develop and conduct a DEI organizational assessment of the town. The scope of the assessment, based on the recommendation of the consultant, may include, and then there's this list, a lot of these we've talked about together in this committee. Some kind of town employees survey, a committee member survey, elected officials survey, resident survey, maybe some focus groups or community conversation, a review of town policies and procedures, a review of hiring and personnel policies and practices, as well as recruitment and retention strategies for staff from marginalized groups, review of language access across all services, departments, and functions. Consider looking into areas of equity beyond race and ethnicity, including sexual orientation, gender, gender identity and expression, ability, disability, and age. And then, again, this is where we need to weigh in and think about it, about including the larger departments, again, I don't know that we have time for this conversation in the next 2 minutes, but let's weigh in it. And then seeking, the whole point is of hiring someone who is an expert in this work to get recommendations for incremental changes for DEI improvements to policies, procedures, practices, both internally for staff, leadership and committees, and externally for volunteers, residents, and community members that interface with government staff and elected officials, along with an action plan. So the piece, hiring a consultant costs money. And if we're going to be asking the board to pursue this effort that costs money, we need to really make a case for it with the data as mentioned above, and also with these types of points. Right now, the work in this area is on our committee, but we are limited by the time that we spend together, and how much we have to cover. The staff who are on the D&I committee are limited by our other job responsibilities. The community members that are members are limited in your lives as volunteers. And we don't have expertise. And I think that is the most important. We have passion, we're learning always, but this is not by any stretch a professional expertise of ours. And then I think about the idea, at town meeting, I didn't vote, but it was voted to start a disability commission. And one of the residents who spoke about that in support of it talked about how people in the disability community have a mantra, which is shared by many communities who are marginalized, that never about us without us. So, I think I would recommend that consultants are people who have lived and professional experience in around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that would be necessary in order for it to be effective, lasting, and meaningful. And that the direction and guidance needs to come from experts in these areas. In consultation with other towns doing this work, the town where I live is doing this work, so I've learned a lot from them, but I've also talked to staff in Arlington and Needham, and I'm trying to arrange a meeting right now with Lexington. They have recommended so far starting with expert consultants because that will ensure quality and sustainability and prevent the duplication of efforts and the backtracking. They have told me, we've started with really good intentions and efforts doing kind of a piecemeal work to improve equity or to diversity, equity, inclusion, but without the guidance of experts and consultants, we found ourselves having to backtrack and repeating ourselves and not doing it in the quality that we want to. So that's just, a couple of pieces of reflection. And then this is something we talked about last month, that staff training alone is not enough. Anti-bias training done without the context of larger systemic change that is driven by organizational leaders has proven to not only be ineffective, but can sometimes reinforce bias behaviors. And I am looking for a reference for this because this is something I've read. I just need to find the reference. And then why does this need to come from our select board and town manager, from our organizational leaders? Because the changes need to be universal with the same expectations across all departments, committees, and at all levels. Constituents and community members will be looking to elected officials for responsiveness and leadership. Department heads require inspiration, direction, and incentives from town manager to follow through and enforce change. And if there are no incentives for change or no consequences for lack of change, then there will be no sustained change. And then here are some of the examples that I have come across that towns are doing. So these would be the kinds of things that would come out of the work with a consultant. Just these examples. Some towns are hiring DEI coordinators for the town itself. Some school districts are hiring for the school districts. Some places, particularly school districts, are doing full-scale equity audits, which is a very particular and deep dive into policies and procedures. Our town may decide to do the full thing, or we may decide to do something different. Some communities are doing community conversations. I sat in the town where I live, I sat in on a Zoom conversation that was facilitated by hired consultants and included town manager and elected officials and committee members to talk about what needed to change in the town around DEI. Just one example of something that some towns are doing. Staff surveys, creating an equity team that serves as a working group, a short-term temporary working group to fill a full equity plan as advised by consultants. Some towns, including Arlington, are using the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or are joining that. So it's a, I don't know anything about it yet, but there's except what I viewed real quickly on the website. And then some towns are doing staff training through curriculum that comes from the National League of Cities Race Equity and Leadership Program. And that is, again, they are adopting that curriculum, but as guided by hired consultants. And then some towns, Needham is an example, have started affinity groups for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other marginalized employees who work in the town. So for example, I don't know what the demographics of our town employees are, except, what I assume from looking. And there are very few people of color who work for the town. And oftentimes when there are very few, those folks can feel isolated and like they don't have a voice, and creating an affinity group is one way to empower and bring those voices forward and give a sense of support to folks in those groups. And then the beauty of all of this is that the Boston Foundation has created, last year they created a directory of racial equity capacity builders. Do we want to focus specifically on racial equity? Do we want to also include other areas of equity, as we mentioned earlier? All things to consider. So we're over time. I do want to just entertain a few comments and questions about this. We can figure out where to go with it next, as well as we need to talk about scheduling. So just hang in there with us a few more minutes. All right. Do you want me to keep sharing or do you want me to close this?
Close. Thank you.
You're welcome. So just immediate thoughts, reactions about what we reviewed just then and where to go with it.
I, for one, have lost the ability to concentrate at the moment on disability. So if anybody younger has something to say, they should. I'm ready to quit at the moment.
Yeah, real life.
I think this is a great start. I think I would personally like to noodle on it, look at some of the links. So I think it's an amazing start and consolidation of sort of this vision. I'm curious to hear from, I think it was Shazia and Sarah, or
yeah, Shazia is the only person. Ema had to leave. By the way, if you didn't catch it, Ema left at 4:03, and Ryan is away, but they'll be joining us. And because we kind of wrapped up some of the other work, if one more person wanted to join us in the subgroup around this stuff, we could do that. Or we could form a legit subcommittee too, that we had minutes for and all that stuff. But do we want to leave it for now that people look at the Google Doc and the Word doc and make comments and give them back to me? That way we're not deliberating as a team, but just give them back to me. And then I'll bring that to the next time. The subgroup, I'll try to meet with the subgroup again. And if one of you wants to join the subgroup that hasn't been a part of it thus far, we still will be good as far as not having a quorum. So let me know that. Kim?
Will you send out the document with the edits that you just typed in some comments? Is that available to the group?
Yeah, that is the Google Doc. So that you already have a link to that, but I'll send it again and I will add those comments to the Word doc so that you can have that as well.
And just on that note, since it is in Google Docs and it can get updated, can you just make sure you capture the document as it stands right now? Because that's what needs to be attached to the minutes.
I will create that. I will make that a PDF and put it with the minutes.
Shall I move to adjourn?
Okay, one more thing we got to talk about real quick. The governor is going to evacuate the emergency order that requires remote participation in meetings.
Allows.
For our next meeting, which means that we legally will need to meet in person next time. And that is all well and good. I also know that our community has loved having remote access. So I am going to see if Westborough TV will continue to show our meetings and record them. And we need to talk about, if we're meeting in person, what time that's going to be. We lost some of our members, so it's going to be a challenging conversation. But historically, pre-pandemic, we met on a Tuesday at 5. And I'd personally like to recommend going back to a Tuesday at 5 or 5:30. But I'm not going to make that decision by myself. So what are your thoughts?
Thursday works better for me, but that's just for me.
Thank you,
I like
Shaz.
Thursday also, but I could do the Tuesday.
I just can't do Thursday at 5. I can do Thursday at 3. I just can't do Thursday at 5. That's the challenge. And I know that some people can't leave their jobs, in the middle of the day.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, if we can, and again, this could be a hard variable, but if we can establish a quorum in person, others can remote in through the technology.
And I'm trying to pull it up quickly, the governor's order. I'm trying to recall if we have the ability to continue to meet virtually a certain number of days past the expiration of the order, or if we lose that ability as of June 15th. Because we could, if we can meet, there may have been a 30, 60, or 90-day provision to the governor's order.
Because it would be nice.
Suspending the provisions of the open meeting law. So if we're able to meet virtually again next time,
that would be
maybe
nice,
we could
because then we can hash it out.
Have this conversation.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm not quickly finding that order right now.
Well, doesn't the selectmen allow Skyping in to their
It's
meetings
not,
if
that's
they-
the open meeting law that allows, even pre-pandemic, as long as we
Yeah.
had a quorum in person, we could have members, which is what Shelby was suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so that in theory, all of us who are staff who work, in town buildings already could be present physically, and those of you who also could be there, but the rest of you could join virtually if you needed to. But it would be nice to have a more of a full conversation about day and time.
And I don't know if you're looking for a motion on this or just by consensus. If we're able to meet virtually our next meeting, do we want to stay with the 3 o'clock Thursday timeframe? And we'll meet
Yes.
virtually if we're able to. If the expiration of the state of emergency requires us to meet in person, we can comply with that and then follow the provisions of the open meeting law that could allow a few members to join remotely if need be.
Sure. And if that's the case, should we also keep the same meeting time for that one meeting until we figure it out?
I would suggest that too.
Okay. I like that plan.
Okay.
I don't feel like we need to vote on it.
I don't think we do.
Alma or Shazia, do you have any anything else you want to add to that conversation, since I can't see your faces?
Oh,
So Thursday at 3 either way, right? Yeah, no, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, good enough. All right,
Now
May I-
I move,
yes.
I move to conclude this very productive meeting.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
second it.
And Shazia seconds. All right, Shelby.
No, let it go on. No.
Oh,
Yes, Marshall, yes.
okay,
Boo,
yeah.
boo.
Kim,
Foster, yes.
Sarah,
Connors, yes.
Rana,
Rappaport, yes,
Shazia.
I want
Oh.
to say something at the end.
Okay, Shazia
Tariq, yes.
and Alma
yes.
and Presley. Yes, Rana.
I would like to thank you again, Kara, for your outstanding work as heading up this committee. You are truly amazing in what you put into this and the time and the effort and the thought that you do. And it is, and I'm very happy. I'm happy and proud to be a part of it. And I think a great deal has to do with your extraordinary leadership. So thank you.
And I second that.
Thank you. That
Really,
means a lot. I really enjoy it.
but it's
This
really-
this committee gives me energy, so I appreciate it.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
You are kind, and I appreciate you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.